Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Meet the Chief. As always, I'm Tracy Byrne, and we have a awesome guest with us here today, a good friend that we've worked together for years here at WWT in a lot of different capacities, John Giacomini, who has recently taken over as CRO at Gigamon. So welcome, John.
Hey Tracy, great to see you, and glad to join you today on this call.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm excited to dig in with you and specifically hear about your first 100 days. I know that you got to enter at a really fun time.
Yeah, so that 100-day mark is kind of a thing where you're supposed to report back all of your accomplishments, and I was reflecting on that recently, and I joined in the end of the fourth quarter. Well, actually, about 3 weeks into the fourth quarter, and it's a great time to join a company because you see how it operates under pressure, and you get to meet people at the interesting times when they're under extreme stress. But I was proud to watch the team execute in the fourth quarter. I got to meet people, quickly and got involved in things right away, which was always valuable because, you get to know the business pretty quickly under that level of velocity. But you also have to kind of get ready for what's next. And so I was able to, in parallel, take advantage of, the fact that I was new and start to lay out the plans for what began our fiscal 25 at the beginning of the year. We had our sales kickoff on the third week of January. Annual operating planning and all of the things that you do at the beginning of the year. So it's been a busy couple of months, but been an exciting time for me for sure.
Oh yeah, I bet. And that's actually wonderful to kind of join a company like you're saying and kind of see how all of the big deals get closed kind of under pressure, especially in the role that you have. It's laying that foundation for kind of how it looks going forward. I'm sure there's so many takeaways that were super valuable for you.
100%. And it was also, good for me to establish a little bit of credibility with the team because, there's always uncertainty when a new leader comes in and, they're wondering if that individual is going to add value or just make their life harder. And, due to relationships with people like yourself and some of our business partners, I was able to make a phone call and, understand where things sat. And so I tried to be part of the solution, not just add work because, people are always looking over their shoulder, wondering what's the shoe that's going to drop with the new person. And so, I was pretty adamant about staying out of the way, but that didn't last very long. That's not my nature. So, it was time to dig in and see where I could help and move the needle along. And, of course, meeting the executive team and immersing myself into just the flow of the business. And, every company has a cadence, every company has a, set of circumstances. But when you're new, you get to just ask why. And if you don't like how that's going, you just change it. So I've been pretty busy. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Yeah, and you got, I'm sure, to meet people while working deals, which is a very different dynamic than just kind of that, hey, here's an introduction. This is how I operate. They got to see it. So that's super cool.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy of I like to make the news, not report the news. And so, in the fourth quarter, obviously, for people following along that maybe don't know what we do, it's usually a back end loaded year and things kind of build up all year. And so, the conversations are really they can frame effectively when you're trying to report the news. It's just what's happened, but when you're making the news, it's like what's the next step? What needs to happen? What adjustment do we need to make? And um, I got a little bit of experience at this, so I was pretty comfortable jumping in. Obviously I didn't have the technical background and some of the, the historical context, which is always valuable, but sometimes that's actually not a burden. Because you don't have any of those things, you can just be like a 3-year-old and ask a lot of questions. Be very inquisitive, and you can usually get to the bottom of what's happening if you do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no tunnel vision there. So that's awesome. It's really, it's great to see kind of an influx in energy into Gigamon. And I know you've been such a great business partner for us. I'm sure the decision of, where you're going to go to took just a ton of consideration. I'd love to hear from you, what made you really excited about Gigamon?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. When you're in a position where you get to kind of, decide what to do next. I took an approach of, just talking to a lot of people, rekindle old relationships. It's one of those moments in time where you get to phone a friend, someone you haven't talked to. And, as you know, relationships are super valuable and important in our business. And, just one thing will lead to another. I wasn't in a hurry. So I was able to kind of just review, and I didn't really have a connection to Gigamon per se. other than a couple of associates here at the company that learned of the fact that I was hunting around for what was next, and so they were adamant about this role that was available, and so I kind of heard about it from a couple of people that I had worked with in the past. Those happened to be our head of worldwide channels and our head of sales engineering, two people I had the great opportunity to work with in previous roles. And then the dynamic here, which was something that I don't know that I could have ever recreated, but our two investors are Elliott and Cirrus Capital. And the two operating partners from those investors are actually both coworkers of mine. We were all together during my days at WebSense when we moved the company to Austin, Texas, purchased by a private equity firm. And so, it's a little bit serendipitous, but on a Zoom call now, I have two of my old coworkers that are actually, part of the investment committee that owns our company. And having that familiarity and that knowledge, it was a it was a unique element that I don't know that I would be able to recreate, in any other role. And that actually was the thing that probably got me to peel the onion back quicker here at Gigamon. And, then obviously just having a couple of, board member relationships, that's not enough to say, yeah, that's where I'm going to go hang my hat. But as I
Mhm.
got to read the rest of the management team, understand the journey that the company was on, it became pretty clear that this was the next home for me.
Yeah, that is. I feel like those are such key elements because if you think about it, it's like the culture of the organization that you go to and the people that you're going to interact with. When you understand kind of where they're coming from and their vision, and just have that familiarity, it really allows you to go that much faster, and it's just a lot more in sync.
Agreed. And if either of those individuals watches this video, there's no hall pass, by the way, right? They're as demanding as they once were, and there's a set of expectations. And from an investor's point of view, we're an asset that they're trying to help us be as successful as possible. And they have their own metrics and KPIs to manage, and so it doesn't come with any less pressure. But there is value in them understanding who I am and how I've operated in the past. And, so it makes it a little bit easier to suggest, the directions I'm headed. And, not that they're saying yes or no to tactical decisions, but, I have that familiarity with them. And again, that was a very unique element in this opportunity that, certainly I've been exposed to boards and investors and somebody, but it is different here. The way that our ownership group is assembled, it's really two companies, and they are very actively involved in our success. And so we talk with them all the time, and just having that familiarity makes it a little bit easier. And to my colleagues on the management team, I sometimes can kind of share with them ways to communicate with those individuals because I know them well, and that's also helpful, right?
Yeah, you're the translator, so that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. I think what he meant was, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great to see that you've landed in such a wonderful spot with a really really solid team extended, kind of throughout the organization. What are you seeing kind of when you look at the state of the market and the future outlook as far as how you guys are interacting in the space?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been in the cyber discipline for almost 20 years. I was in cyber before it was cool. And I stumbled into it. It wasn't a planned event, but a company I was with had to kind of rebrand and repurpose, and off to the races was the cybersecurity business. But, there's a couple trends and themes that play into our value proposition. But, as at WWT and the vast number of, partnerships you have, that's what a customer's world looks like. And the days of buying another capability to whack a mole because of the problem you had last Thursday, they're kind of over. And so as companies trying to rationalize their investments and get to the point where the investments they've made are actually providing the security and the barriers that they thought they invested in. I think that's a real kind of positive and negative, because some of us made a good living, playing that whack-a-mole game with a great feature that was relevant for a period of time because, the adversary moves so quickly. But I think, in today's world, the funding for those feature-based startups is kind of cooled. So there's a bit of stability in the larger organizations probably having to play a bigger role. And for a company like Gigamon, we've been in the network space for almost 20 years. And as we've evolved, the network security and the CISO buyer, we now are seeing a lot of collaboration between what was the traditional network and what the security team has to do. Obviously the underpinnings of people moving to the cloud and all of the changes in compute, those
Mhm.
also open up, spots and holes from traditional security architecture. And we found ourselves to be in a pretty good spot to rationalize that tool investment, make some of those things more efficient and go better. And, at the end of the day, hopefully save some time in the SOC because there's just not enough security professionals to continue to review the pile of needles versus looking for the stack of needles. And we've got a good position between that network and security architectural conversation to kind of bridge the gap and help rationalize both sides.
John, it's funny. The more use cases that you dig into around what Gigamon does, it just echoes a lot of the challenges that our customers are facing. So it's when we talk about kind of like that technology and process bridge between network and security, I just think that when you can bring technology in and bring like your sellers and they're actually removing some of those silos and communications that our customers inherently have just because when they're coming to the table and working on an opportunity or working on a project together, it really allows them to streamline their business. So it's like when we talk about optimization and SOC optimization, it's exactly what you described. It's we don't have enough like highly skilled security professionals right now to keep up with what they're responsible for protecting and all of the advancements in the offensive attacks, right? So it's I think it's really meaningful what you guys do. And aside from that, like even when you just dig into like the visibility and observability aspect of it, a lot of organizations that we talk to, they're really focused on kind of like this element of like resilience where it's do we have a mature fully functioning architecture? How do we know that if we can't see it? And so I just think it's such a foundational block to a good cyber posture.
Yeah, well, we have a benefit with our historical roots of being a scalable network device, sitting and seeing every packet in an on-premise infrastructure. So, it's helpful to prove your ability to scale with, some of the largest banks, financial institutions, service providers across the globe that, have used us for some traditional just packet brokerage type of activity, which some might say is a little bit mundane in today's world. But remember, a cloud is somebody else's network. And
Mm-hmm.
all of that same activity happens. You just may not see it in your own data center. You may be pointing to something, but all of that same infrastructure that was supported, for many years, now somebody is managing that network. So we've sat in that really critical spot. But as we've evolved, for example, we've added the capability internal to terminate SSL at scale. And so, one of the most simple premises of a security architecture, if it's encrypted, you can't see it. Well, not
Right.
true when we're supporting a customer because we can take that encrypted tracket at wire speed and provide the visibility and controls necessary on that east to west traffic. And, you know, we can agree that, most adversaries they're in, unfortunately, the days of the perimeter being the high wall that you could keep people out, they're in. It's that lateral movement and the ability of an encrypted packet is where they're traversing. A lot of traditional security infrastructure hasn't gotten to the point where they got a control in that area. The next objection will be like, well, we have, X amount of traffic. There's no way you can scale. You go back to our roots and, that's at the core of what, the company started doing. And so our evolution into this area, scale was always, a consideration for us.
Yeah, it's so important, especially in certain verticals when we think about just the scale of what is going through their environment. And it might be kind of interesting for us to kind of dig into how you guys look at verticalization and where you're seeing a huge need. Kind of what comes to mind for me is like you talked a little bit about service provider, and it's such an interesting use case that you guys are so well suited for.
Yeah, well, I mean, the verticals, I think a traditional, software company is going to talk about finance and insurance and healthcare and manufacturing. I mean, our solution is a bit ubiquitous. We do require traffic. Like, we kind of need a high volume environment. Not necessarily, we're not very user based in the sense of like how many endpoints. We don't think of the world that way.
Mhm.
But I was talking to one of our service provider customers the other day, and they're talking about 6G. And I don't know, it's the first time I heard somebody really talk about that in earnest. Of course, I didn't really know a whole bunch of the differences between 5G and 6G. So I did a little bit of education, but
Mhm.
the world is moving at a very, very rapid pace. And we're fortunate to support, very, very large household names in the service provider space, both nationally and internationally. And it's another example of as people aggregate and look for someone to provide some of their compute services, the service providers, the GSIs, those are logical places where people look, to get pro services and things. Your worldwide presence is there as well.
Mhm.
Service provider is one of those areas, and the envelope continues to push, and the amount of traffic that gets pushed through those networks, it's that Moore's law. It doubles and triples on a basis. And that said, a comment around. I also read an article recently about the hyperscalers, and this happened to me as an executive at a smaller startup a few years ago. Our hyperscaler bill, I'll leave the vendor out of it because they're all great business partners, but that bill was going up 10 or 15% a month. And so
Mhm.
we had to put a lot of R&D into trying to keep traffic off of that network. And so there's another interesting dynamic because of that cost increase. We're starting to see people come back from a kind of an all cloud architecture and maybe move a few things back into a more formalized kind of, data center that they have more control over. And that hybrid architecture is what we really believe is the one that will likely prevail because of cost efficiencies, some things you want to control. And again, we kind of, our world is to eliminate blind spots and dark corners. And that transition, as people potentially bring something back in, that's another area of opportunity for us. And that's also where some of our business partners, and of course, our partnership with WWT, you're going to know about that project well before we would, right? Because of your involvement at the customer level in solving all kinds of problems. And so the awareness of those kinds of trends, that's where we have an opportunity to architecturally fit and make sure that people have the controls that they needed before they went to cloud. Now they're in cloud and potentially now going to a more hybrid architecture. And again, that's an economic statement that, I mean, it probably benefits us in the long run. But it's
Yeah.
something I kind of believe for a long time because that bill just kept going up. And, that's just a real problem for companies that they thought that was going to be the answer. And then the economics don't work.
Yeah, and it's what we're kind of seeing too is with the rise and just an excitement around AI. It's exactly what you were just describing, where it's like there is a move back to a data center because when we think about that, it's a physical manifestation of technology. All of that's happening on the back end in a data center, and it'd be really neat to hear like what you guys are seeing on that front and how AI is shaping your business strategy.
Well, we have some development plans to utilize just the basics of AIs to help with like platform configuration and just, kind of to help our own customers, make things work simpler, kind of the old wizards or configurators, but to use kind of the port the knowledge base of how do I with like the right answer. So
Mhm.
they can be more kind of self-help and not have to pick up the phone and talk to customer support. But I think there's two twists for me, in my opinion, on AI. Number one, the adversary has it too.
Yep.
So, we're trying to prevent problems. They're using the same technology to create problems. And so it's just a new arms race. But they don't have P&L. They don't have EBITDA profit margins. They are fighting unfair from a standpoint of the way that we get to defend them. So, I think that's something that the safe use of artificial intelligence is a battle we have to face. But I also just look at the proliferation of traffic. And then you think about things like IP. You know, I have a 23-year-old daughter that doesn't use email and is hyper efficient on a cell phone, can, order something in 2 clicks and the reservation's made. The newer generation is used to that unfettered kind of safety of the tools they use. But, what about source code? What about intellectual property? What about the things that you don't want in the wild? And so I worry about, the younger workforce who's just used to trusting everything and how they'll interoperate inside of an environment. So, controls like ours, with the ability to see all of the requests that are coming and going and be able to kind of provide visibility to those to allow the, the CISO, for example, to put appropriate control. We can't stop this, you know? I mean, like one of the video conferencing applications has an AI companion. It is the best note taker I've ever seen in my life. But you know what? I don't want those notes out in the wild. There's a lot of information that gets discussed on a video call that, it's good for us to, hey, we took the action items or whatever, but the ability to control those things. So, I think, AI is here to stay. And we have to figure out how to use it in a way where it's safe and controllable, but also protects the company's, IP and their unique business advantage, because that in the wild, that's pretty valuable information for an adversary to get their hands on.
It certainly is, and that was an interesting angle that you just kind of brought up, especially about the note taking during meetings, because it is an interesting element that these are also tech companies, right? That you're sending your information to, and depending on what industry you're in, it's like that's very protected information. So
100%. I mean, I've encouraged my sales team to ask a customer if they would be okay, that we use it. Certainly, there's the proper way to do that, because you capture really what happened. I mean, manual note taking just does not hold a candle to what these applications can do. But when you start to think about the dialogue, and then people get a bit more reserved and they may not be able to share at the level you would expect, you have to put it in good sense. But for internal calls, for anybody watching, give it a try. It's amazing. And you look at the notes and you're like, wow, that's exactly what I said. And he or she said they're going to do that. And I love the action oriented nature of that collection point. Because as a human, you hear what you hear and you take a note with what you take a note with. These tools they're just smarter than that. They kind of read through everything that is said. And it's kind of amazing. So I'm an elder statesman. I've been at this for a while, but I do like to embrace, new things and try and figure out efficiencies. And I think, in the sales world, in the B2B world of selling to customers, this is going to become more and more prevalent. I still believe in the relationship. You and I've known each other for a while, Tracy, and, we would never get that over an electronic exchange. But I think more and more buyers they're smarter before they actually engage. They want to do research. They want to learn about things. So I think our world has to meet the buyers where they're at, feed them that information, let them be in a position to kind of assess where they think they want to be, and then invite us in to kind of go deeper and, do the architectural discussions and find the reality of that. But that's another transformation that I guess maybe the next guy's problem in 5 or 10 years. But for now, I have to kind of set myself up in our company for that success as well.
that's right. That's right. And it's interesting that you kind of tap into how customers leverage AI. I do actually want to go back to what you were saying about how internally you can use AI, just from your perspective, like as a CRO. I wonder if you've noticed even the behaviors of your sellers changing, leveraging AI. So just, little side story, oftentimes we'll be in these development meetings and someone's not there, and I actually will change the way that I'm presenting in that meeting, talking to AI, so they'll capture a certain note. And it's just funny how adaptable we are.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a germane, sales implication. I won't advertise for the company I'm a big believer in, but I use an automation tool for our forecasting, which is where we collect all of our opportunities. And the underlying data is in our Salesforce instance, which I think most people are familiar with. So it still requires, the opportunity management to be correct. Like at the end of the day, that has to be right. But this forecast module has an AI prediction. It takes in about 200 inferences by seller. And, there's a term in sales, a sandbagger. They don't really tell you that the deal is coming in and then magically the PO appears and then you see it in the forecast. And then there's people that are optimistic. They think they're going to win every project, and, maybe they are not as good as they think they are. So this artificial intelligence companion in this tool, it makes a prediction on your forecast. Now, it's still not as good as a sales leader who's on top of the projects, knows the opportunities and the customers, but it's kind of a piece of the triangle, right? There's the seller and the book of business they're working. there's the management oversight of, where are we in the opportunity? What partner are we with? How do they feel about it? And then there's this AI tool. And I've challenged the team for it to be right, because if the underlying data is accurate, it's eerily correct. And I mean, I'm okay with it being smarter than me in this regard, because it's difficult to predict, an outcome for the company, and then you got to kind of deliver. So having this kind of crutch, if you will, this little brother to help me kind of agree on what it says, and if there's a big anomaly, like if if APAC region's calling X and it says Y, it's a conversation point. What is
Mhm.
it seeing that you're not seeing? And almost always it's like, oh, well, there's this, and it's not where so it just kind of flushes out that accuracy. So there's a good tangible example of where, the AI in the business world is something that I embrace, because it makes me look a little smarter.
That is so cool. And I do think that like having something to start the conversation, like when we were talking a little earlier about like from the customer's perspective, they're able to accelerate a lot of their decision making because they can get publicly available data just summarized really quickly. But I do think one of like the neat things that we explore in our partnership as well is like using things like the ATC, where you can take a lot of information, right? And a lot of times you know it's things that you're hearing as far as like features and functionality. But I do think that there's really something that's just priceless, being able to get your hands on something and have like kind of trench level knowledge of how something actually performs in the wild. And so that's like a really neat element of our dynamic and relationship. And I know that that was something that we were able to partner on both in your previous roles and at Gigamon as well. So it'd be neat to hear your perspective on kind of how we use the power of really testing integrations and outcomes, and what that means to you guys.
Yeah. So there's a shift here that I think is underway. We need to think about where the buyer's coming from versus where we're coming from. Obviously we got revenue targets to hit, and we have to grow our business and do the things that a sales organization has to do. But put yourself in the customer's shoes. They have a lot of competing challenges. They have risk to reduce. They have 100% uptime goals. And so when they introduce something into their environment, they have to look at the glass half empty. They have to look at it from, how is it going to break, and how is it not going to interop with these tools? And obviously the PowerPoint presentation for that capability looks elegant, but you got to put that PowerPoint presentation inside of 60 or 70 others. And that's the world that they live in. All of a sudden, you go from one or two cards, your ace and your jack, and you got a blackjack, so they got to look at all 52 cards and decide any one of those can break their environment. So the ATC is an opportunity for them to prove out that interoperability and actually see the vision of why they would make a change or an adjustment in the world of tool consolidation. Okay, CIO wants to, there's an initiative to consolidate, make it more efficient, save some costs, etc. Well, what are you losing? What are you now not getting? So you have to rationalize those risk elements. And if you use the ATC, you kind of have like a playground to set all of that up in a not dangerous environment, not a production environment, not a like, what did we just do at 2 o'clock on Thursday? Bad day, right? Where you have the ability to kind of visualize this. And there's oftentimes going to be a trade off. But if you know what those trade offs are and you can kind of build around those as you move or change or adjust, I think it's a very effective tool, and it eliminates the fear, because fear is one of the things that holds people back from change. They know they're not in a good spot. They know they need to enhance or improve or adjust. However, there's an old story about pain versus pleasure, right? The human being goes to one or the other, and the pain associated with the change oftentimes is the reason not to do it. And then in our world, then the breach happens, and we've seen it. All of a sudden, the money flows, and everything that they should have done, they will do because of that panicked environment. We, of course, like to meet the customers ahead of those problems and keep them from those. But that's that association, and the ATC, and the integration capabilities, and then like WWT's view of the customer. Usually with your customer base everything they're doing, and that
Mhm.
visibility, we don't have that visibility. right? We kind of see our slice of the world, and so it's important for us to kind of zoom out and get, kind of get into the buyer's eyes as to where they're at. And I think that's an efficient way to be successful for long-term partnerships, is be successful on the first project and you'll get more. But if you fail on the first one, you're a bad name and you're out, and you got to go find somebody that doesn't know you, and that's just a pretty hard way to go.
Yeah, it definitely is. And like you said, like so much of what we do, especially with like the clients that we work with, I mean, you think about healthcare, global banks, there's so much riding on all of these things, not only just like the cost perspective, but like the like human life when we think about healthcare. And being able to deliver something that has validation attached to it is really, really powerful. And it's not just powerful for us because it's a differentiator, but it's powerful for the people that we support because it allows them to just go faster and more confidently, which is really nice.
Well, anytime a project gets funded, anytime somebody internal to that organization becomes your salesperson,
Mm-hmm.
because they now have to cross collaborate with, if it's a network project, with security and IT and all of the different groups, maybe up to the CFO. They have to become your champion. And it's a lot easier for them to then champion the cause if they can believe it themselves. And there's proof in seeing. And so, using an ATC as part of the evaluation process, it helps to get that validation
Mm-hmm.
outside of just proving it. It's like a test drive of a car. Well, you need to test drive that car probably 50 times. You need to drive it in the snow, in the rain, in the mountains, in the sand, at high speeds, in traffic. Well, you don't get to do that. You drive it around the block and the indicator works. And you're like, okay. But the ATC gives you the ability to kind of test something in all of those operating environments under high load, different, with a corporate webcast with, 7,000 people over a WebEx stream. Like, well, what happens to the network now? And how does this behave? Those are the things that give that internal champion confidence to say, look, this is going to work in our environment.
Yeah, it certainly does. And one of the things that I'd love to tap into you a little bit more because talking about integrations and ecosystem partnerships, you guys really do so much to drive additional value for technology that's either in place or other technology initiatives that the customers are investing in. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the key partnerships that you guys have at Gigamon, and then kind of how you guys play into that? How do you guys add value and efficacy to those solutions?
Yeah, we started at the top of the call talking about my 100 days in, and I will tell you this was one of the most positive revelations I had here at Gigamon. Is our ecosystem partners outside of our business partners, we make a lot of tools better. And it's kind of easy to say that, but what does that really mean? And, log data at its basic, core, under attack, it's the first thing someone will shut off, because that's like the old school, EKG to find out what's going on. But if an adversary is in, the first thing they do is shut off the log data, right? And so our ability to just enhance like Cribble and Splunk, um, beyond trust, there's I think we have 60, 70 integrations, and sorry for the people I left off the list, but it's not a commercial for our partners today. Just being able to enhance that metadata that gets delivered to those tools, we can drive efficiency. And in some cases, some of those tools kind of pay by the bit, right? And so if we can enhance the data before they get it, there's an opportunity for some cost savings. And maybe that vendor's not so happy if we've done that, because maybe their bill goes down. But again, thinking about the customer, thinking about the limited resources, and again, that stack of needles. Well, what are you supposed to do with that, right? So if we can, help sift and narrow down the noise and get more signal to some of the investments that are already made. When there's this, I've talked about tool consolidation. That's a big thrust, but like some of those tools might be on the brink of not being renewed or used again because they didn't get the efficiency out of them. And I found an amazing use case for customers that tell me why they like us, is because we've made some of the tools that they believed could be effective in their environments. We've actually opened up and put a spotlight on that capability by delivering the right data to the right tools, and then also doing that in an efficient way. And again, we rely on that as a lead source. And back to partnerships like ours with WWT, you're representing those vendors as well. If there's a pain point, you're like, why is that not working so well? That could be a potential introduction for us. But in the
Mhm.
same vein, we get the same feedback when we're there, and we know one of our ecosystem partners is maybe struggling a little bit. We'll reach across the aisle and go work with them to kind of enhance it, because if we think about the customer success and we are associated with that, we'll be fine. And that might be sounding a little high and mighty from a CRO, but I genuinely believe it. And every customer that you can impact positively, they're going to tell four or five more. And if you get that flywheel turning, all of a sudden your marketing team looks brilliant. Your sales team looks like they're executing at a high level. It just
Mhm.
gets easier. And so I just relentlessly believe in making customers successful. And those ecosystem partners, they're a key part of what gets considered to be a success or a failure. So our ability to think about our business partners, our technology alliances and integrations, and the customer, if we think of that triangle, it's a pretty good formula.
It certainly is. And I'm sure that's really a key to like the culture that you're driving within your sales organization. I think that we've all probably at some point in our careers seen, when we think like the bad stereotype of sales, where it's just kind of pushing something. But we've also seen like the most glorious example where you feel like you're just working on the best project ever with a really great team that sometimes they don't actually work at the same company as you. And I think those are the elements when you infuse that into how your sales team looks at customers. They look at them as you're on my team and we're
Yeah.
gonna crush this together. I think that really changes the dynamic and it naturally is successful.
Well, again, given my silver sideburns and my duration in industry, um, I've kind of seen our industry grow from a few suppliers to thousands. And one thing that I would say is a knock on the security business is we don't really interoperate together very well. I mean, a lot of the innovation is stovepiped, and it may solve a problem, but again, put yourself in the customer's shoes. Very rarely is that one mole that you're whacking enough to, just stop, drop, and roll. So they need us to cooperate. And so, this concept of alliances, whether it's a hyperscaler and their cloud connection, or it's the tool set that they're on, they want us to interoperate. Not only does the technology speak from box to box or from endpoint to server, but like, how do the companies interoperate? You know, can the NDR vendor pick up the phone and talk to our support organization and collaborate on an anomaly that neither of us have seen, and put two heads together versus one to solve on behalf of the customer? And our alliance's commitment, like, that's the kind of partnership we want with them, because we're gonna ask for and earn a referral from them in a certain case, and
Mhm.
likewise. But if the customer gets the input of, like, two organizations advocating on their behalf, that's a better environment. And again, just the synergy and the momentum that's built from that, that's the power of three: our business partner, our alliance partner, and us. It's just stronger than if we try and do it alone.
Yeah, and we've seen that time and time again with your organization. It's such a unique element because I talk to partners all the time and they're all really wonderful in their own ways, but I always pick up on like the different trends, the things that they focus on. And I have always noticed that Gigamon thinks about things in that triangular fashion where it's how do we work together and collaborate to make something better as a whole. Even working with other technology companies. So it's funny that you mentioned that because I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always work to do there because stuff keeps changing. Like, nothing is stagnant in our business. What worked yesterday all of a sudden doesn't work today. And so you kind of have to be committed to it. So, cross collaboration from our development organizations, we need to be tied in to some of those ecosystem partners that we have prevalence with, because the good news is customers become to rely on that. The bad news is customers become reliant on that. And so you have to make the commitment to stay relevant. So, an innovation that a business partner might be doing doesn't impact today's production environment. So it's a tall ask, but again, I think I'm beating this, to death. We got to put ourselves in the shoes of the customer. The days of just pushing our rope uphill for our own good and hoping it works out, like, those companies won't survive in the next generation. And so, you know, our partnership with WWT, you're looking out for the holistic view of that customer. You might
Mhm.
have 50 or 60 things you're representing in there. You've got that zoom out view of the whole world. We're in
Mhm.
for a specific, opportunity or project, but we have to leaf in to that entire environment, or we're going to be the ones that, got the bad name associated with us. And I just have this one customer at a time belief. If you do it right every time, then you don't have to think about what you said, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Wow. And it's the other angle of that too is because you talk a lot about like collaboration within tech. If we kind of zoom out and look at it from the adversarial perspective, sometimes they're more collaborative than we are. And that puts, our customers at a disadvantage because a lot of those things, it's open information that's out there. As something progresses from like a malware perspective, a lot of times that's available to everyone. And when we look at like the cyber industry, it's in order for us to be able to defend against that type of open environment, we have to be so collaborative as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, trend wise, I think that's beginning to happen. I wouldn't say because the cyber suppliers decided it had to happen. I think it's more of a market dynamic. But,
Mhm.
in the days of, hundreds of startups coming into the ecosystem on a Tuesday, because the money was free flowing and, there's a lot of innovation that I think we still need. But, customers really can't consume it at that level. There's just not enough time to even really think about it. So the buying persona is they've got to get more from either their existing stack, or if they're going to make a change, it's going to probably aggregate a couple of things to the left and the right out. So I think by nature, you have to think about who's the NDR vendor, who's the EDR and endpoint vendor, and what do those best in class solutions look like? Because not everybody can do everything. Not a knock on Microsoft, but for years they entered a lot of markets, and we could agree that the idea was good. But when you put it up against the three vendors that eat, sleep, and drink one vertical, maybe not as good. They've gotten better in a lot of areas, but like a lot of people have Microsoft. I mean, a lot of people use Google, and then you click it down. So we have to just interoperate in those environments, and I think the market is speaking. They need us to be more collaborative because when something goes bad, they don't care that vendor X and vendor Y don't talk to each other. The customer
Oh,
had a problem. And whether it's a Wall Street Journal article or they had to pay a fine and they couldn't remodel the sixth floor of the ICU unit that was where that capital was going to go, it affects everything. And so
mhm.
I think it's incumbent upon our industry to continue to find ways, to still, compete and, knock the crap out of each other in the marketplace. But when it comes time to thinking about the customer, we're thinking about them and how they be successful, and then we collaborate and work together as well.
Yeah, we echo those sentiments exactly. And I think that's one of the cool positions that we have where we get to kind of knit a lot of this together as really part of the customer deliverable. Because, like you said, we're seeing not only the whole picture from a cyber perspective, but a whole picture from a technology landscape. So it's actually really a nice position for us to be able to help drive additional value even within those customer organizations, knowing kind of where different organizations are driving and aligning initiatives and just kind of creating more wins. So it's really exciting to have alignment in that viewpoint.
Well, and you know, nobody has all of the answers. People can speculate on the ideas, and having the trust that someone's seen somebody else execute on that or do it and kind of break through that wall. There's leaders and followers. Some people like to be the first to break down the wall because the innovation is worth it. That's usually met with some pain. But the laggard buyer, the one that's going to be around for 10 or 15 years, they may be a little bit more cautious, but the pace of innovation, that laggard trail can't be years behind. They can't be. A laggard that isn't embracing, artificial intelligence, for example. They're just
Mhm.
they're just not being honest with themselves. It is prevalent. Use the old term shadow IT. If they like, oh, we don't do any artificial intelligence, our employees don't touch it. Wrong answer. It's being used
Right.
every minute of every day. They're just going around the blockers you have applied, so you may think that it's not being used. But you can't fight those innovations. It's the way people, operate. And, again, I refer to my 23-year-old daughter. She's my test case for how, the younger generation operates. They get a lot done in a non-traditional way. They don't
Mhm.
use email, for example. Like opening up an email is like you'd think you're pulling her fingernails off, right? But she works for a company that does use a little bit of email, but like she collaborates with her team with all kind of real time communications, and they serially can handle all of that type of activity in a real time way. So silver sideburn folks, right? Like we have to embrace that because that's the new working generation. And so the traditional, hub and spoke, castle and moat, like the things we were all trained through, it doesn't matter anymore. The
Mhm.
network is everywhere. The network I'm on right now is this laptop talking to you. Like,
Yeah.
and we have to embrace that for how the velocity will happen. So as people make decisions, there's comfort in knowing that either someone else has done it, or you know what, you pretty well proved it out that it's going to be successful. There's still always that little bit of risk. You got to take that first step. But if you got
Mhm.
the right team around you, even if it doesn't go well, you'll know why. You can back up, reset, and end up being successful.
Wow. Yeah, those are really great insights, John, and it's really wonderful just in talking with you just to see kind of all of your kind of your vision and your viewpoints around how you lead sellers and how you lead people and really the culture that you're creating or adding to at Gigamon. And it's really very exciting for our partnership and also just knowing that there's such great cultural alignment.
Yeah. Well, I'm I'm not any less competitive, but I think I might have mellowed a bit over the years. I think there's a better way to deliver. And, I've always believed in servant leadership, which, using a wood pile, there's somebody's got to chop it and somebody's got to stack it. And depending on the situation, I'll have the axe some days and I'll have the gloves on putting the wood pile together. And I think if you set that tone, with the team that you're willing to do the work, that is necessary regardless, and you give people an opportunity to make a mistake and not feel threatened. And if we keep the customer in the viewpoint of everything we do, the market will take care of us and it'll reward us handsomely. And then the relationships you build over time. I mean, my partnership with WT spans a long time. And it's like-minded organizations that care about the same stuff usually works out pretty good. And there's integrity at the base of my operating environment, and that's certainly a core tenet of the operating environment at WWT. And that's why things work. You need to kind
Mhm.
of see things the same way.
That's so true. It's so true. I mean, the when we take care of customers in the right way, it really changes the outcome for them and then for us at our partnership because there's never any friction in how things are delivered and making sure things are being done the right way. And I just think that's so important in business.
Well, I use the term advocacy. It's a pretty high bar for, as a customer and advocate. An advocate is someone that will tell another person about what you do when you're not in the room. And
Mhm.
I believe that, one of the things I find very unique and powerful about WWT is you advocate for your customer. Like, so they have another leg of the table that kind of immerses themselves in that organization. So, whether it's pounding me up for a little bit more discount or offering up something to get something over the line, but you're advocating for the customer, but you have their best interests in mind. And again, when we insert ourselves into a project, we're there for some period of time. You're there all the time. And so you have the advantage of that deep relationship, but you also have the responsibility. And
Yeah.
we're not lost on that. We have to be successful because there's no WWT seller on the planet that would risk any PO ever to impact a relationship in, one of your top five, six, 700 customers, which is, 80, 90% of, your annual output. And we
Mhm.
understand that. So if we get in, we got to be great. And we got to kind of enhance the experience. And then that's a powerful situation. That's where two friends get told inside of WWT that, hey, we had this problem. We rang up the phone and we called, John's team, and they were able to unlock this benefit that we knew was there. And then that's when the momentum happens, and then it's good for both of us.
It truly is. And I just think that really like the customer, the customer centered approach is something that we dig into so much, because I think it's hard in any organization. Sometimes you think about your processes and how you deliver something, but I think it's really a wonderful and enlightening thing when you take a step back and actually think about how is all of this received, and how is this driving towards their outcomes and their goals, and the things that they're metriced on, because it's so important for all of us really to be helping them be successful in every single way.
And it's not like a perfect chart from 0 to 100 that goes up linearly. There's
Mm-hmm.
weird stuff that happens inside of a customer. Like teams don't talk to each other. There was bad blood from 8 years ago. They don't get along, and you're in this situation where you become an alignment tool. You sit between two organizations, and so for us, we have to be perceptive. We use the term buyer persona often here. You know,
Yeah.
and at the root of a buyer persona is, what do they care about? And you run into situations where like an individual doesn't really care about the things you think they should, but they're still
Mm-hmm.
part of the process. And you just got to find those wins. You got to work hard to overcome the naysayer, overcome the arms folded curmudgeon, because they still exist. They don't want any notoriety. They don't want to change anything, but the business might be, kind of closing in around them. And we still have to embrace those people and make them feel like they got a successful piece of this as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of interesting too in that regard, because it's like we get this privilege to be a helper, and we have like for you and I, it's like we see so many different organizations and how they operate. We see kind of where they stumble or where they've been able to overcome something, and it's a really cool position to be in, to deliver that to a customer or to an individual inside of a customer, where you can help them grow or advance or kind of get past a roadblock that might have been in their way for a while in a creative way. So it's we are very lucky to be able to do those kind of things.
I agree. I get to do it. I don't have to do it. That's kind of the way I like to look at it, right? I get to get on a plane to Sydney, Australia. I get to fly to Singapore. I get to do a red eye to the New York. I get to do these things. But again, if you're at the centricity of how customers need you to be, then that's part of it. And you learn a lot by, being field active. I mean, people in my role, depending on the size of the org and what had happened, a lot of them fly the plane by the gauges. I need the gauges, but I like to look out the window as well. Meaning, I need to kind of be there, in the ground level, because you just learn a lot. And sometimes there'll be a system or a process that like you're not even aware of, that's a little clunky, and you
Mm-hmm.
have a customer take you through that, and it's like such an easy fix, but no one said anything. You get that real time experience when you're just out there, and so I'm always happy to do that. And, you learn a lot about applications that you didn't even think about. We make
Mm-hmm.
our own product marketing team brilliant by we come back and say, hey, did you know they're
Yeah.
using us this way? And there's a couple chins that get rubbed, and you're like, it's brilliant, and then we can share that kind of insights to others, because there's creativity and there's really bright people.
Yeah, John, it's so clear you've just got such a hands-on approach to leadership, and I'm really excited to see all of the great things that you're going to do at Gigamon, and kind of how the teams rally around the culture that you're bringing to them.
Well,
And
my honeymoon isn't over, but I'm tied to the results like the next person. So I'll be
yeah,
around for as long as I can continue to, deliver on the commitment. But so far, so good.
I know you've got this. Before we sign off today, though, anything that you'd like to leave our listeners with, just kind of as you look at your vision going forward for Gigamon, and just any just quick highlights or pointers for the path forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think this. I said it earlier in the conversation about this hybrid cloud kind of shift. People went all in with cloud. There's still a little bit of just full on-prem. They're afraid of cloud, but if you hear that there's trends in that area, that's going to create some opportunity both for all of us, but it'll also create some blind spots. And this concept of deep observability and the partnerships that we have with the likes of Cribble and Extra Hop and many of our other partners, like there's a role for us to play in helping that customer, and everyone needs to save cost. And if the hyperscalers have kind of gone past their useful expense and people are starting to trim, And it does just this trend, trends happen in our business. If they come back this way, I think it's going to be great for our business. And so just people having an awareness that we can solve and make that a useful and effective environment would be something I would share. And then, just personally, if there's anything we can do to support anybody, and if we made a mistake somewhere, you can get to me directly. I love to get those phone calls because I'll fix anything I know about, but it's hard for me to fix stuff I don't know about.
That such a great message, and really just speaks to the person that we've all worked with for years, John. That we really do enjoy partnering with you and working with you. And like I said before, really excited to see the continued growth of this partnership. And thank you so much for joining us today.
I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to having a great fiscal year this year, and I expect lots of contribution from WWT.
You got it. Thanks, John.